1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in a Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the Hustlers quick to roll.
Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to Life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. Yeah, that's me gassing right there on that intro. And if you want to get that song, tap in, hit me up on my email, 16tolifemusic@gmail.com, and I'm going to get it to you ASAP. Now, let's hop right into today's video, man. So, to keep it 100 with y'all, this video is definitely inspired by the death of Daniel Size, the YouTuber, who unfortunately was shot and killed in Arizona a couple of days ago, right? And it's crazy, right? Because I went to the pen in 1994, well before YouTube, social media, so on and so forth, right? And you have, of course, individuals who are in a certain age group and in a certain age bracket. They grew up during the YouTube, social media era, Facebook, Instagram, so on and so forth, right? And I'm not gonna lie, man, I always trip out when I see dudes who have been to prison conducting themselves a certain way on social media that would have not been acceptable in prison, especially when they are from a certain area where, you know, we didn't grow up with social media, right? So it's assumed, even though you should never assume, right? It's assumed that individuals who went to prison conduct themselves a certain way, because at the end of the day, prison is all based on respect, right? If you respect others in prison, you will definitely have much less encounters. That doesn't mean that you will never get into something, but you will definitely have much less encounters, right? Because the prison yards are full of two things a lot of times: alpha males and people who think they're alpha males. And so when you walk around, right, you could have a confident stroll in prison that some people may interpret as you feeling that you're tough. And simply on the way you walk alone, people will develop opinions about you and look for opportunity to get into it with you, just because they want to see if you are about that walk, right? And so when I see individuals just doing things that would have been considered in prison cell soldiering, and those people are of a certain age, I definitely scratch my head, right? Because it makes me wonder if these individuals were going along in prison to get along, right? And I understand after a while, you know, being on social media, it's the way that people communicate. So if you see a dude disrespect you on social media, even if you have been to prison during my era, eventually you may lash out because it's a form of communication, right? But this is something that I really try not to get into because it really serves no purpose, right? One of the hardest things, in my opinion, about having a YouTube channel especially when you have been to prison and you give a certain amount of respect and you would like a certain amount of respect in return, is dealing with the comments, because people at times will come into the comments and say the most craziest of things, right? And so for me, that's always a challenge. But I have to keep in mind, man, sometimes, these dudes in the comments, they may be at home indulging in the most deadliest, dangerous narcotic, and they may be high and out of their mind, and everybody in the comment doesn't deserve a reply, right? Now, without saying a whole lot, right? Individuals out there who know me from the street or whatever, who have encountered me or know me well, know I was involved in quite a lot, right? I don't come on here and say a whole lot, you know what I'm saying? But I was involved in quite a lot. I think individuals from my city definitely know that, right? Let's just say that the two crimes that I went to prison for wasn't the first two crimes that I committed and got caught for those, right? So I say that to say that when you come home and at one point you were involved in a lot, because the gang world is regardless of how big your city is, the gang world, the subculture of the gang world is extremely small. So people remember, right? And so one of my biggest concerns, to keep it 100 with you guys, is when I came home from prison, being gone for 24 years, not only did I fail to recognize some individuals I had known all my life. Sometimes I would go to funerals or be at certain places, and I might say to a homie, "Hey man, who is that?" He'd say, "Oh man, that's..." One time a buddy of mine said, "Oh man, that's Chris Meshack." Man, I'd been knowing Chris Meshack my whole entire life. Chris Meshack was in a grade below I was. And he had gained so much weight, I didn't recognize him. And that happened on many occurrences, right? So by me going to prison for some situations, of course, that everybody wasn't happy about, you have to have a healthy concern about who is this, because now this might be this dude's nephew, this might be that dude's son, you know what I'm saying? And you have no idea of who an individual was, right? And so I'm at a friend's house, right? And I came home, and this was a good friend of mine, used to see him every day before I went to prison. And so I came home, I went to his house. We was kicking and chopping it up, maybe about 5 or 6 months after I was home, or maybe a little longer. He unfortunately passed away. So people was gathering at his house, and suddenly a dude comes up to me and he says, "Hey, chill, let me talk to you," right? I say, "Hey, what's up?" He said, "Let's go over here." So we walked. So when he says that, I'm automatically on point. He says, "Hey, man, I just want you to know, I'm not tripping on what happened between you and my cousin." Now, when he is saying this, at this point in time, I don't even know this dude is the cousin of an individual who I'd got into an encounter with, right? I guess he assumed that I already knew. Now, I guess, fortunately for the both of us, oh, you know what? No, my bad. That's not what happened. We was introduced after my homie passed away. While we're at the funeral for my homie, then he calls me. Then he walks back up over there and he says, "Hey, chill, let me talk to you." So then we walked somewhat on the side of the church, right? And by that time, yes, I did know who he was. And so he was telling me basically, chill, I'm not tripping on what happened. That was a long time ago. It was some street stuff. And fortunately for the both of us, he had I would say a street mentality, right? And so he understands certain things happen in the street. And then also when his cousin, chose to involve law enforcement, he understood that was a no-no and he was not tripping, right? But so I say fortunately for the both of us, right? But, he could have had no understanding about that. Some people will be extremely biased when situations happen, even if they are in the street and someone that they love, who is near and dear to them, and they can't accept it. They don't care about this dude that violated the rule. Now, up until the point of their loved one violating the rule, this dude may have been out there beating up, DPing all his homeboys, or doing whatever the streets require to be done to individuals when they violate a rule. But due to him being biased, he doesn't want to accept the same thing done to his family members when they violate a rule, right? And so now he has no understandings. Now he stops thinking like a gang member, and now he wants to think like a square civilian, right? And it goes bad. But fortunately, that situation did not transpire with that particular incident, right? Another time, I'm on live, right? I'm on live, and a dude in the question, he asked, "Hey, man, how about you tell us some stories about these individuals? Were they out there in Bannon?" Now, the individuals he mentioned were the individuals who I had got into some altercations with, which had led me to prison. So when I read the question, it dawns on me, okay, this is somewhat odd. This dude must, just the way he phrased the question, right? I didn't think that it was just a random dude asking a random question, right? Then a little bit later, he says in the because I forget my exact response, right? But my response in the moment of being surprised by the question, I think it was like a telltale sign of my displeasure of his question and or the individual he was speaking on, but I was trying to not let it be shown, right? So later, he hit me with another question saying, "Oh, chill, I know what happened, and basically that was my family. I believe it was his cousin, and he wasn't tripping." But I forget his exact response, but his response wasn't confrontational, right? But it did, before he even hit me with the second response, I was aware that he knew he had more intimate knowledge than he revealed in that first question, right? He just wasn't asking, "Hey, tell us some stories about these two dudes," right? So I say all that to say that when you out there in the streets and you doing a lot, right? Or you doing just enough to make somebody mad, whatever, you always potentially going to have individuals, of course, who are displeased with what you've done, and also they're displeased now that you're home. And you have now put yourself in a predicament of a catch-22, because now you damned if you do and you damned if you don't. You know what I'm saying? Do you ride around naked, or do you keep that thing on you and make sure you have some protection? But also, you have to keep in mind that due to your past criminal history, you don't have the luxury really of getting caught with it. You also don't have the luxury of taking any type of active self-defense on anybody that you feel is a threat, because the courts is not going to show any mercy on you because you shouldn't have been armed to begin with. But then you also have to look at it like, would you rather be the harmer or the harmee? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think that you can get out of prison before you can get out of a casket. In any situation, you have a better chance of getting out of that prison cell, no matter how much time you're sentenced to, than you do of getting out that casket if you get sentenced to that casket, if you catch my drift. And so I'm going to always take my chances of getting out of prison. And that's just me. And it's unfortunate, right? And so this is a trip, right? Because like I say, I come on here, I tell my stories, I do my reactions. I don't necessarily come on here calling myself trying to instill wisdom to the youth, right? But dudes always hit me with comments saying, "Hey, chill, thanks for the wisdom that you give us, so on and so forth," which lets me know, regardless of my intentions, there are always people listening and watching, which is something that I learned in the self-help group. No matter what you think you're out there doing, you're an example. If you're in the hood selling drugs, shooting at people, you are still an example. You may be a bad example, but you are still an example, right? And so a dude, and I forget, I wish I would have remembered his name so I could shout him out in the comments. He left a comment not too long ago saying, "Hey, chill, man, respect to you, big bro. I don't want to call you Unc, so I'll just call you big bro. But I appreciate all the wisdom and stuff that you give us, right?" And so that's cool to know, because like I say, I'm not trying to give wisdom, but if you pay attention to any type of story or whatever with the right ears and the right mindset, you always going to find some positive things and some wisdom to extract from what's being said if you're thinking correctly, right? And so my reply to that individual also was this, man. When you guys are out there and you're young, you have to be careful of what you get involved with, right? Because You may forget and you may try to move on, but circumstances and people connected to those circumstances may not forget and may not let you move on, right? It reminds me of a video I seen on YouTube maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Some dude that went to the feds and he had did something, had done about 12, 15 years in the feds and got out and paroled to a halfway house. And so one day he leaves the halfway house and his car is right down from the halfway house on the same side of the street, on the same side of the street that the halfway house is on. On the opposite side of the street, there's a dude working on his car. He has the hood lifted, and he's dressed as a Hasidic Jew. Now, I don't even know if the dude who had done all the time and had left the halfway house or was heading to his car, I don't even know if he recognized the dude dressed as a Hasidic Jew or not. But anyways, when the dude who's dressed as a Hasidic Jew and is working under the hood of his car is on the opposite side of the street, and he's parked 3 or 4 cars possibly down from the dude who had done the time, and the dude who comes down and starts to enter his vehicle. Now, when the dude starts to enter his vehicle, the Hasidic Jew is looking. He runs over there, and when the dude's getting in his vehicle, he whips out the thing and pops him 3 or 4 times. I don't even think the dude seen it coming, right? Because he didn't turn around. He didn't do any of that. You know what I'm saying? And he lost his life. And, you know, that was a cold setup, right? And that just goes to show that, man, this dude was not hyper vigilant about whatever situation he put himself in. And even though he thought it was all milk and cookies, obviously everybody else, or at least one individual, hadn't forgot. And so those are the situations, right? And so, you know, I say all that to say, to connect that back to, unfortunately, Daniel Size, who had lost his life, right? I mentioned in the video that I did yesterday, I've always seen him to be calm, cool, and collected, even in moments of showing his displeasure for individuals that he had problems with, right? But then in doing some research yesterday, I seen some videos where I would consider he was wilding out, and he was not acting in ways that would be becoming of a quote unquote convict, right? And so it's a cold situation, right? This YouTube stuff is a cold situation, and you know, we have to realize as YouTubers, you know, all YouTubers, and even more so those who are fortunate and blessed enough to have a decent following, right? When you drop a video, even if the video was viewed by 5,000, 10,000 people, you know, you could be 100% right in everything that you're saying. You still could upset some dude. You know, you could upset some dude who's mentally unstable, or maybe the dude is not mentally unstable. Maybe he just has an opposing view to whatever it is you're talking about, and he takes displeasure in you. Now, you have created an enemy who knows exactly what you look like. But you don't know what this dude looks like, and this dude may not even wake you up, you know, he may not wake you up to the fact that he's angry and upset with you and wants to do some physical harm to you, right? And so that's the cold part about being on YouTube. You know, you almost paint an X on your back, because regardless of what you're talking about, right, I have yet to run across any YouTuber that people do not find displeasure with, right? And it's crazy because it's almost like, and people probably wonder why I keep wiping my nose. I got my fan down here, it's blowing, you know, because it's hot out here in Cali, man. So I got my little fan down here and it's blowing and stuff. But anyway, and I got these 2 bright lights on back there, man. It's, you know, I'm going to probably have to get up out of my little man cave and go find some other place in the house to start doing these videos until this Cali heat disappears, right? But, you know, it's, and now I've lost my train of thought, but it's, you know, okay, so yeah, that's where I was at. I've never ran across any YouTuber who does not have people who are upset with him, right? And it's crazy because initially when you first start off and you're a new page and you got good content, people are rocking with you, right? And then later on, for whatever reason, later on they become upset with you. I've seen it happen to myself. I've seen it happen to a cartoon from Five Trey. I've seen it happen to Aunt Hefe. Whoever the new guy is, with the good content, Damian Porter. You know what I'm saying? Whoever the new guy is, people like you, and they leaving all these good comments, and then maybe you look up a year later, and now certain individuals have found certain reasons, to become upset with you and voice that in the comments, and I'm gonna keep it 100, right? And this is just my mindset. For dudes to hit the comments and leave all these disrespectful and crazy stuff, that's some weak coward type stuff too, because I'm assuming a large majority of you guys wouldn't even say that stuff in an individual's face, right? Not that you're necessarily scared of him, but I mean, the average dude doesn't want any confrontations if he's free, just because you're free and you're enjoying your life, right? But social media has made people so comfortable with disrespecting people because it's no accountability and it's no consequences to it. It seems like certain individuals have failed into that, right? And so while I'm not perfect, I do try to not be disrespectful as much as possible, on YouTube, because I see it to be a very weird and weak act. Now, if I'm clowning and having a little fun, yeah, I may do that a little bit, right? But like I said, that's one of the things that kind of made me, metamorphose into this more wisdom spewing individual, I guess it is, that people see me as, because it's people are tender on YouTube, man. People are so tender with their feelings, and so but anyway, I was just saying, it's crazy because as a content creator, we put our face out there, right? We put our face out there in front of thousands, millions of individuals, right? And so, I always have wished that I could have done YouTube in a way where my story's out there, but not my face. I don't necessarily like to get recognized by strangers and people, because you have no idea of their intentions, especially when you've been involved in nefarious activities, criminal type activities that led me to prison for a lifetime, right? Yesterday, I went to the funeral of my homie Pee Wee. We had his funeral yesterday, right? So now, as I enter the church, I look to the left, I see two women. They speak to me. One woman is very excited. She's got a smile on her face, right? She's like she's really excited. I don't recognize these women, but they somewhat look familiar. So I'm thinking, of course, since we're at a funeral service for my homie, that these are some women from Bannon, right? So I go up there and I sit down. I sit up there about maybe 5 or 6 rows away from these women. But the whole time, the joy that was in that one young lady's face from seeing me was just, I'm wondering who in the heck was that? I'm just thinking over and over and over and over and over, right? So after a while, I can't take it. I go back there, I sit down, I say, hi, hello, how are you? Who are you? And come to find out, it was my good partner, I would say one of my best, greatest friend, OZ, who initially was a co-defendant on one of the cases that sent me to prison. Then charges later on was dismissed against him. It was his daughter. Now, unfortunately, for all those who loved and knew OZ, in 1998, when I was in prison, OZ was shot at a party and unfortunately lost his life, right? And his daughter at the time was 3 years old, but she looked just like my homie. And so that's why I recognized her features, but I just couldn't put a name with the face, because while I had heard of her, I had never met her, right? And so we talked, and she was really excited and, asked me some things about her dad, so on and so forth, right? But I say all that to say, just as well as by her being the daughter of my homie, she could have well been anybody else as well who had a problem with me, right? And that's the bad thing, in my opinion, at times, of being on YouTube. People know you, and you may not even get a chance to find out what their intentions are before, they act out whatever they want to act out on you, right? And so, to me, like I say once again, this was inspired by Daniel Size, because I seen him on certain videos, going lightweight, ain't no lightweight, going crazy, saying a whole bunch of stuff and, basically dropping his low. He was at a park walking around, talking about, dudes know where I'm at. I'm not hard to find. And, it's an unfortunate situation. And that is a behavior that I would have not attributed to a man of his age, especially a dude who did not grow up in this social media space. Now, my little 4-year-old grandson, they grow up with this stuff. So they know all about computers, and he can walk me all around his iPad and show me stuff I don't even know. But when you haven't grown up in this lifestyle, to me, it's almost lightweight backwards to when you get a chance to participate and be involved in it, become caught up in the madness that some of these youngsters are doing, screaming and hollering on here and just whatever it is, So anyway, that's my little 2 cents right there, man. Once again, rest in peace to Daniel Size. And, for those out there, man, watching and stuff, keep in mind, man, that when you put your face out there, you never know who's watching and paying attention. And everybody may not be pleased. And you can do YouTube for 10 years, talking crazy, yelling and screaming and disrespecting people and so on and so forth. But you may run across that one person who is serious about doing some harm to you, and that's all it's going to take. Anyway, y'all already know what it is. It's your boy 16 of Life. Resume normal program.